Shalom. I would like to thank J Street in my name and on behalf of the Sheikh Jarrah Solidarity Movement for honoring us tonight and for supporting us from the beginning of our struggle. I would also like to convey the appreciation of Nasser Rawi and our partners in the Sheikh Jarrah Committee. If you would have met me a few years ago and asked me what I think about the occupation, the most you would have gotten out of me would have probably been a few vague utterances expressing a bit of shame and a bit of distress, but mostly confusion and unawareness. There can be many reasons for this, but one of the main ones is that the occupation had not touched upon me personally, at least not directly. It was so easy growing up in West Jerusalem without knowing of the injustice taking place a few hundred yards away in the eastern part of the city. A curtain of ignorance was and still is part of the methods of concealment in which I, as a Jewish Israeli woman, grew up. Like many of the young people who protest weekly in Sheikh Jarrah, I was raised on democratic and egalitarian values. High school civics classes taught us that while Israel does not have a constitution, its Declaration of Independence is our Bill of Rights. We learned that the founders of Israel vowed that the Jewish state, and I quote, will foster the development of the country for the benefit of all its inhabitants, that it will be based on freedom, justice, and peace as envisaged by the prophets of Israel, that it will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex, that it will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture, safeguard the holy places of all religions, and will be faithful to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations, end quote. I ask you, how would you react if your government treated the Constitution as empty words? I have chosen to fight. I have chosen to fight against injustice in Sheikh Jarrah, to fight for the Israel that could have been, to fight for the Israel that still can be. I believe I speak for many in the Sheikh Jarrah Solidarity Movement, on behalf of whom I proudly receive this honor tonight, when I describe my first experience in encountering the situation in Sheikh Jarrah as one of disillusionment. Witnessing the ways in which my country dispossesses individuals of one ethnic affiliation and privileges those of another, seeing the blatant injustice and discrimination perpetrated by my own government opened my eyes to a reality I did not know and generated in me and in many others a determination to create a different future. Difficult as it has been, my Sheikh Jarrah experience is not one of despair or resentment. Alongside injustice, I found new hope and purpose. The commitment of thousands of fellow Israelis to justice and equality, and the renewed ability to bridge over ideological and national divides in favor of a shared vision restored my faith in the possibility of change. Since those days in 2009, these initial impressions have not faded, but rather have been reinforced. In every town and village where our movement is active, whether it is Lud, Taibe and Bet She'an, or Silwan and Isawiya, we encounter, alongside dispossession and discrimination, willingness and enthusiasm and meaningful partnerships. In Al-Oon, a small compound in Sheikh Jarrah, 30 families face the threat of eviction. A disturbing alliance between Israel's custodian of absentee properties, a state agency, and the American millionaire Erwin Moscovich allows Jews to reclaim properties they owned prior to 1948. We know that Jewish families who left Al-Oon during the war received abandoned Palestinian properties in West Jerusalem as compensation for their loss. And yet, they return today to claim back the land. The Palestinians living in Al-Oon used to own property inside the Green Line, but Israeli law doesn't allow them to reclaim their houses or request compensation. Thus, a young generation of Palestinians learns that the law is just a reflection of national and racial prejudices. They learned that first-time refugees can easily become refugees a second time, and now it is all done under the auspices of Israeli law. While it is clear that this inequality before the law is morally and politically intolerable, we believe that a mere condemnation is not enough. Together with a growing number of young Jewish Israelis, I have come to the understanding that these times call for Jewish-Palestinian cooperation, and that it is both our duty and our interest to work together with Palestinians who have chosen the path of non-violent resistance to the occupation. This is the only way to build a tolerable future for all of us in Israel and Palestine, a future that recognizes the dignity of every human being. But we discovered that Israel treats our peaceful Jewish-Arab solidarity as a serious threat. More than 160 of our activists have been arrested since December 2009, and more than 40 indictments for illegal assembly are pending against us. I, for instance, was arrested 4 times at Sheikh Jarrah and am facing 3 trials, one of them a libel suit for $250,000 shekels, submitted by the El-Ad Settler Organization for slogans I chanted during a demonstration in Silwan. And yes, the El-Ad Settler Group does benefit from sizable and tax-deductible contributions raised right here in the US. But even when I am under arrest or taken to court, I know that I am still a privileged citizen in a country that practices ethnic discrimination against its residents. Although examples are legion, I want to share the story of one friend and partner. Jawad Siam is a social worker and community organizer in the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Silwan. Unlike similarly sized neighborhoods in the west of the city, Silwan experiences overcrowding, a severe shortage of classrooms, and absence of any community center, alongside the constant harassment of the El-Ad Settler Organization and their state-funded private security. Jawad and his colleagues are our partners in Silwan. Together we organize non-violent demonstrations against the settlements, which draw hundreds of Israelis and local residents. But Jawad's work with the Israeli Jews has had consequences far more severe than those I have endured. Jawad was arrested for alleged assault just a few weeks ago. Unlike myself, Jawad spent a week in jail, followed by an extended house arrest, which ended last week when the police raided his house and took him into custody again. Jawad is neither a criminal nor an enemy. He is a partner and a friend. And I know that working with people like him is the key to the future of my city and my country. Jawad's story is just one example that inspires me. I invite you to speak with members of Sheikh Jarrah Solidarity's delegation to this conference and hear more about our work, our partners, the difficulties we encounter, and the strength we draw from working to make our country better. Solidarity is a grassroots movement premised on the necessity of Jewish-Arab partnership for a democratic society. We are committed to direct engagement when and where injustice occurs. Solidarity believes in the transformative potential of Jewish-Arab cooperation. We know for a fact that the artificial barriers between Arabs and Jews are surmountable. We uphold the moral permissibility of nonviolent civil disobedience in the proud tradition of the American civil rights movement. We believe that privilege corrupts and that systematic discrimination is incompatible with democracy. Our critics portray us as enemies of the Jewish state. But it is ironic that a country claiming to be the victim of a campaign of delegitimization shamelessly delegitimizes sections of its own citizenry. We reject the false dichotomy between security and democracy. We refuse to settle for anything less than a true end of occupation that is a necessary but not sufficient condition for realizing our goal of substantive equality and genuine democracy in Israel. We know that true friends do not reinforce your weaknesses, but bring out the best in you. We see the same story unfolding here in the United States, where an outdated Jewish establishment vilifies those in the Jewish community who dare to criticize Israel's policies. This is why J Street is such a groundbreaking organization, and why I am so proud to receive this honor tonight. There is much work ahead of us. I'm sure that together we can make it happen. Thank you.